Hi, this is Tony Cook, and let's take another look at these 3-bay covered hoppers. The reason I'm doing this video is Athearn recently brought back its PS Pullman-Standard 2893 3-bay covered hopper, and this model originally was in the Athearn Ready to Roll line, which that's this Santa Fe example. It's moved up to Genesis over the years. I have a separate video that covers that, but after I'd done the video, I got to thinking about these hoppers, and I always get confused on there's a couple of different kinds that have been produced over the years in HO and plastic, and there's differences in the more modern ones that relate to production phase. So, starting off, the most antique and unique of the bunch might be this AHM release, which was produced by Roco in Austria. This is interesting and unique, as I say, because it's the first of this style, and I think it's about 1963, if I recall correctly, is its release date. It comes out about the time as the Roco made PS1 40-foot sliding door boxcar. It's as old as the old BL2 produced by Mahano in Yugoslavia. So this car's been around forever, and it is that typical 3-bay, the round roof hatches, rib side car. For years, I always thought this was the same as the 2893 and thought it was, and always questioned most of the AHM cars share the same data information and call for a 3215, a slightly larger cubic foot capacity. I think it may actually be that this car is that or close to it. This car in later years, this original version, didn't have body mounted couplers, was the typical AHM release. I think it was Jim Conway at Concours that maybe first got a hold of that Roco tooling and did some upgrades, and then this car came back again as a Robbins Rails release at some point. But again, I think it is generally close to the same tooling. I don't think this is that much different from this AHM car. The difference being that they did shoot these pieces and made it so it could be, a more serious release with body mounted couplers and had actual screws holding the trucks in versus, Roco's plug for the truck. But again, I think in general, the tooling here is the same or copied or enhanced, however you'd want to put that. So there's several versions of that car if you're after it to have it as an HO model. Again, I'm leaning towards the fact that this really is a slightly bigger car, a 3215. If you notice, there's a little bit more of a ledge on the bays, whereas here the side comes down a little further. Again, may be wrong, and this car is so old, again, being going on 60 years old is the tooling for this plastic example, that it probably is nowhere close, even as good as it seems to look, to being a legit car. Now, for the real Pullman-Standard 2,893 foot cubic capacity cars, they come out in the early 1950s and are produced, I think, just into the 1960s. And of these modern examples, there's this Athearn car, and Walthers has done a version of this car. Athearn appears to have tooling for both. When the car was new, these double, and when I say new, I mean new at Pullman-Standard in the early 1950s. So I think like 1957, 58 is when it changes to this look. And the difference being, see the double ribs there above the bolster of the truck. I think that is an early phase for the 2893. And then this Walthers tooling, which I think it's a gold line in this example that I'm showing. I'd have to do some research to see how far back it goes. But this plastic car has been in Walthers line for many years. It's probably a mainline release in its most recent form. This is that later version of the car, which would be late 50s into 1960s era. And Athearn has also tooled that. This Grupo Mexico version in this latest release, although I don't think it's new tooling for this run. I think they did both early and late versions, but this single rib here on the outside and kind of the equal spacing is the later example of the 2893. So in general, if you're looking at these cars, this AHM made by Roco and later released by Concours in the 1980s and Robin Rails, I think is actually a slightly larger cubic foot capacity car at 3215. Then this more common, the popular prototype is a 2893. This is how you spot the early production example, and then this is later production examples. And again, this is Athearn Genesis, and this is a Walthers model in HO scale. So these are neat cars. They transitioned from, I guess they would have been around technically at the very end of steam, but they're basically early diesel era, and I think they saw use into the 1990s in some occasions. But it's a neat hopper. It's a car I've always liked, again, because I had it as a little kid as this AHM, and then here are more serious examples of it. But there's another look at the Pullman-Standard 2893. Thanks for watching.